days ago, I was walking back home and it had rained heavily. Now, while that in itself is an inconvenience, something that made me stop when I was walking back home was seeing this flower. Now, this flower comes from my earlier tree in my garden. And why it made me stop was because it had rained so heavily and the roads were dirty, my pants were muddy, and it was just so bad. But this flower was able to survive all that and still look beautiful in the middle of the chaos. So, of course, I picked it up and I brought it back home and I was showing it to my mother, who was slightly confused about why I was just randomly holding a flower. Now, I wanted to protect this flower just to remind myself of that moment of instant beauty. So, I preciously kept this flower on my table so that I can see it every day and always be reminded of that little lesson. Now, I was able to keep this flower looking like this only for a couple of days because slowly, and not dramatically, but slowly, this flower started to change. Slowly, it started to wilt and suddenly became something that I just had to throw off my table and forget about. Is that how we see beauty? Because we admire it while it lasts, and once it fades, we forget about it. But maybe I was looking at the flower in the wrong way. A flower doesn't bloom forever, but while it does, it brings color to the world and can change your perspective just like it did mine. What really hit me was it's not about the flower itself, but how quickly it went to something that I forgot about. And it made me think about how often we deal with things in life, about people, about moments and opportunities. We hold on when it looks good, and we let go when it doesn't. But not everything in life is meant to stay in its best version forever. Some things are just meant to be what they are for the time that they are. Now, moving along that line, something that made me feel like it was steady and not really temporary like a flower is this rock. Now, this rock also comes from my garden, and it's something that I have been passing for the last 20 years of my life. Because this rock has just been there in the corner of my garden in a bed of rocks, steady, quietly, and calmly. And looking at this made me think that maybe some things don't change at all. Some things may not be noticed to matter. Some things may not need to look different to value. They just exist quietly, steadily, and hold things together, even when everything else feels uncertain. Because for me, it could be rain, it could be shine, but I always know that I will see this beautiful white rock in my garden if I were to ever step outside. Maybe that's something that we overlook so easily. The things that don't shine, but support us in everything else that we do. Now, there are also things that aren't just about being or enduring. They're all also about what we choose to do with them. Now, this is one of my favorite pens. And it seems weird to say that, but it is. Because this is what I use during my exams, in my notebooks, when I'm journaling, and it has been a good companion for me whenever I want to put my thoughts into words. And on its own, it doesn't seem to do much. But depending on whose hand it is, it can become something completely different. In one hand, it's just an object. But in another, it can become ideas, words, decisions, and direction. So maybe that is how life actually works. We are what resources we have, not just what we are given, but what we choose to do with it. Because even the same tool can create something completely different depending on the person who is holding it. And in that way, all of us are a constant work in progress. We are continuously changing, continuously growing, and continuously maturing. But if you're only a flower, you'll be crushed and you'll be thrown away. But if you're only a rock, you will never grow because you're in the same place. And if you're only a pen, your words might mean little without the kindness and the resilience of your personality behind them. So to me, life is about knowing what is in your hand and choosing which one the moment needs. Thank you.